Welcome. This is my video for the class. As most of you know me here, soy Sergio, or my name's Sergio, and I had to put this together, but hope you guys like it. Video project script. Analysis of class English 2323. Title: Why Literature is Crucial for Human Development. Study: The Middle Ages. While most of us ponder and wonder about the marvels of the world, many are not aware and have been exposed to many pieces of literature which condemn one to the thought of time and advocate to create reflection on one's life and goals. But in my own reflective thoughts of the English 2323 class, I came to realize how important it is to actually analyze literature. The thought alone of reading things and trying to get a painted image from what is being said can be simple, but looking deeper into the meaning of these literature pieces, one can come to see and give a different sense to its time. Take for example one of Shakespeare's pieces of work, Sonnet 29, titled When in Disgrace with Fortune and Men's Eyes, is for example a work that lets one connect their own thoughts of grief and pain, but lets a value of which one can portray as the present to overcoming the mourning of one's fate. This kind of literature is almost compelling as it applies to any of us in many different ways. Much more that is found from literature can come from any other writer, but in this specific case, Shakespeare had created a total of 154 sonnets on many alluding thoughts of love, war, peace, and death. As mentioned, a more connected thought to me that I had seen portrayed for Shakespeare was the movie Shakespeare in Love from 1998. Although not oblivious to Shakespeare's work, the 16th century or early 17th century literature emphasizes a focus on a sense of a conquest to the senses of a human being. Literature around this time and era was extremely orientated on mourning and loving, which kind of go hand in hand as proven by other pieces of work. Sonnets and all literature alike here have been written with cautious ideals towards someone. They seem to be practices of very old composers who focus their work simply on devotion towards anyone that they have much empathy on. Much like Sir Thomas Wyatt the Elder made much composition on things such as giving farewell to his emotions on love. Take for example, much alike to what we argued in his piece, Farewell, Love, where he seems to outline how much pain he was in while lying to himself about how he loved this woman and she only brought him harm to his life. Given the nature of how many of these things were made, it was only obvious that art would accompany such set stories to give better visuals. Around this time as well, we start a base from the Middle Ages that start off much literature with the belief of God and the many things that came to be from following such ideals of a man worshipping Christ and his word. Looking into the Middle Ages now, and we can come to see that some of the themes here from beforehand that were presented forwards in time are much different in nature. A lot of the nature of the stories here are more entertaining to the thought of God and a higher power that exists above. Many of the poets from this era were given to try to let God be the dictator of man, and so much with also the literature that is written. No presented government, of course, at the time. The Dream of the Brood can be set as an example that comes to show how God has values, and so do the things that come to follow him. The cross is personified and describes its thoughts of how it dreams for that body of which belonging is Christ. Judith is somewhat similar in the sense of what Dream of the Brood is, but although Dream of the Brood is taken from the point of one thing neglecting to fall down to the presence of Christ to show loyalty, paganism is presented inside of Judith, and even at that, Judith is not a full story. It is what remains of a pillage of its time, but the few things that are made and were left of the said story come to show some sort of pact that this character Judith made devoted to Christ, asking for clarity of mind to the upper power, which then leads her to behead and allows her to purge the sin of the man she will give up to the sky, who has committed many much more sin that allows her to proceed forward with and in their own life. End section. New section. As you can come to notice, God is the only loyalty man many of these characters give to, and otherwise their purpose and or lives are somewhat meaningless. To come to figure out if these characters actually exist is another question, but the depth of the general argument is that during this time of era, God and the higher power was actually the topic of literature, as mankind was not able to comprehend how important it actually was for them to be able to think freely. Used to the idea of a monarch and the lead of a king or queen, literature was and has always depicted as infamous for having a hero that could come and save mankind. This sort of literature is presented in future tenses, such as Iron Man or any Marvel movie. Although in the Hollywood scope, everything has changed to fit more dramatic and more audiences. Literature from then made many of these practices focused, with characters' stories, beginnings, devotions, and even almost ideals or follow-ups, leads. Coming from the term of a rebirth, the Renaissance is an era of which everything came to be reborn and renewed. Much alike, literature shifted and became more lenient. Many writers and artists alike depicted much of this era to be, as previously stated, the following and strong bonded connection to Christ and his reward for the loyalty one could provide. Enveloped in ideals, the Renaissance age has too much to do with a huge portion of Roman Greeks alike working to be able to create a better civilization. Humanities and the study of all kinds of knowledge was so incredible that some people of their time did absolutely nothing with their lives and were only devoted to either serving the queen at the time, who was thought to be sent by God. This queen is, from my studies, known as Queen Elizabeth I. I want to divert our focus from the following video to that of what it was to be living at that time and what kind of ideals and things were made out of its time. Something that is not so implored and often is an ideology of what emotions or events or even the most eventful sense and scope it was to be during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Maybe even the 17th century along the lines. And overall, the whole story and narrative of this video is to widen the wounds, which is literature, and why tales and stories foretold many of the occurring world events through fiction and sometimes conveyed them in emotions. Literature is like a block of ice. It can stay cool and keep its shape for as long as it's kept within the cold freezer of the mind, but once you stop grasping the concept, it melts. Luckily enough, matter like water can turn back into ice, since it never disappears unless it evaporates into the bliss of nothing, hoping that ideology made sense. I love literature, and now more than ever am I convinced that sometimes even making a little bit of extra time to read and understand why scripts and words matter is because anyone can write anything with all kinds of words that can be reused in writing. What makes literature from then special is how, in a world which was due to its time, these silly little words that are always repeated aligned and created a faithful emotion and a sympathetic smile to someone in the future. With all due respect, thank you. This has been my project, Sergio Tagle.